finals last week, my group B, so I had to attend.
Yeah? Oh, you guys were B, huh?
Yeah. How are we supposed to do the video? My voice is still not back. And it's mandatory. I emailed Dr. Patel, and how are we supposed to do that?
Do what?
The video thing. I emailed all of us today.
Yeah.
How are we going to do it?
We just gotta get together. I know my schedule's like crazy limited though. Like I have classes on 2 to 4 more those days. And I have some meetings.
We finals. So,
I don't think it was even on last week. We just got some type of money now. Today.
but it has been a part of the syllabus all year round. So, I don't know.
No, I don't think one of the girls. Yeah, I thought it would work.
All right.
But I was like, oh, I'm not gonna do this. I would like to do this. I'm gonna do that with this. I was like, I still really like. And then just. Well, you know, I had to do it. My great people out. And I went through the keyboard. And like all these keyboard. And I just came through all the keyboard tests. And the only way I study is like the rewrite. Yeah, I have to write it down. I swear I'm such a kid. I never write all it will be. It's really cool. Oh, I'm partially close to it. I'm going to write my article and it's like on this side of the library. How's your research? Good. I loved the first 2 days got to be today was my first long day. Because we work this section, so it's like how we do it, so that we can work and do it. This section he's working in, they're doing somewhere else right now, so they should know. But it's like he's a part of the things that are really working with this meeting this month. And so every so often I forget it. And I was like, it's really okay, but also like, it's like happens so many times in my life. Yeah, like the first 2 times, it's fine. And the other time I was like, do you need help? I was like, please ask me. Like, because some of the machines are like, the HIV machine is in like her too.
So you were CLS?
Yeah, we both are.
Where did you? We're in church.
Here in the Netherlands. I haven't done it yet. Yeah, she's here.
I'm CLS too.
Yeah. So it's just like we just started our third one on Monday. I mean, it's really nice because I mean, like with microlab, like you have to ask your person every single day to make it. And the ones that help us is 30 when they have their like the other ones I want is 30 to try. Here I'm like you know 7 to 30. And so once we did all of our stuff today, we didn't really have that many samples because we're only running like immunosuppressive drugs. This guy, this is like in this one area in HIV. And usually all this stuff comes in when the clinics and don't or someone filter. And
Wow, 5 o'clock and only 3 non-C students?
Yeah.
The storm that was keeping everybody away?
I don't know. Oh.
It's hard, like, don't make it today.
Yeah.
It will be like next week and week back to back.
Yeah.
So,
Tough.
like,
Oh man. Yeah. Well, we'll give them a few minutes.
it's gonna get bad tonight.
Huh?
It's gonna get bad tonight.
Is it?
That's what it said. I don't know. I don't trust it now.
I mean, it's been like this all day.
supposed to be a tornado warning. Yeah.
What?
All over like Houston, like and like all of our surrounding counties, like.
I tried looking for a nearby parking because.
Do you? I mean, listen. I don't want to. If you guys live on the island or off?
Yeah, I live on the
I live off the island because I was looking before.
Where do you live? My friend is in. She's at Memorial Herman, like Southwest right now, and like that's like. It's like black outside.
Yeah, it's starting at what, 6 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
It's all starting at 6.
Here it's starting at 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually like
I have it's all 100%.
Well-
Actually, if hail can damage my pocket once.
Yeah.
Yes, I tried looking for a nearby parking. I couldn't find the closest one.
Well, I mean, it's totally up to you guys. I'm here. I'll do the session.
I can't make it up any other day.
I
Yeah.
can't either. Yeah, that's the reason I'm
I was
here.
about to say, I'm struggling to get the video done, but I
I don't even know how we're gonna get the video done because we are so
Yeah.
in all different departments.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna see what Patel
No,
says.
it's not, because I asked her, and is it mandatory? Because I'm not even being a student for the whole year, I'm just in the second half. She said,
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to.
we have to do it. Yeah, I was about to say, because
I thought it's a competition, so not everybody wants to do it. That's what I assumed from.
Yeah.
we have a paper to do for CLS. Like, we have a lot of things actually.
You guys have a bunch of.
Yeah.
At least 30 hours
Yes, which I did, and then I have a 6-page paper that's due now.
6 page, and every single month we have to do like a little snippet of our volunteerism, and we have to do a mini paper about a disease.
That's going to CLS.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's turned into Dr. Enderle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so like we're all prepared for the paper and all that, but I'm a little like, I don't know how, I'm not one to complain much, but I don't know how I'm gonna find time to meet with anybody, because I literally
Okay, I'm in the
have
same boat with you guys.
commitments from, I didn't know we had a.
Okay,
Yeah.
here. This is the email that I got from quite a few students because I shooted an email to all of us today.
Yeah, and it was literally like,
Everybody's in the same boat.
I'm happy to meet, and I'm happy to put something together, but you literally have to meet me between 3 to 5 o'clock
Yeah.
on campus, Monday through Friday.
And then I have to drive to whoever wants to meet whatever.
It is a video that is a competition that they'll air on April 11th for our last meeting, and it's about what we've learned in global health and how to provide
Okay,
for service.
This is news to me. We are not in the same group. I hope you know. That small
Yes.
group B has been divided into smaller groups for the video.
Yes, yeah.
Or did you know
Yeah,
that?
is it required? Yes.
Okay.
I think it has been, yeah. But I'm.
So here's, yeah,
So which is the smaller group?
so if you go through here, so I didn't even know in my smaller group, it's right here. Over here, the groups open and the new tab. Sorry, I don't.
Hey guys.
How are you? What's it do? Oh, 9. So I am.
I am here.
So wait, yeah, and I'm here. So I'm going to start doing this later. Just have to know
We
everybody.
see it. Okay.
Yeah, so you're just getting everything all these things together. We're getting all these things together. I've given them 2 hours ago, and somebody said they had something on there. Smartphone that'll take it.
Okay, so you show me this one.
So, and that's what I'm gonna do. How do we get the class? Oh, wait.
Lovely.
It's on the Saturdays and ones on yeah. Just sort of like.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Yeah. I still haven't heard anything back, but as soon as I hear something, I will let you know.
All right, let me know.
My nerves seem to get over sometimes while in the future first, but I'm like, I'm. At lunch, because they don't have lunch. Right? We just it's literally like, all right, here's where we live, it's decided to decide, we just, right now, we're just shocked that. Somebody's using it in the app on my phone, they're using. So I'm gonna do a video in this for communication class, and
So an app that you can send a video across?
yeah, it's where is it? Find scroll. That's due after. lab next weekend. Yeah, so we're gonna our paper is sorry, April 13th. Papers due. Yeah. And this is my final paper and it's the second paper. So because I'm a master student, I think everybody else is just staff.
Should we start? So, I'm not aware of the weather situation, of the entire weather situation, but it sounds bad.
Yeah, what's going on?
Um,
College station's flooded, and I'm so confused.
so,
And now after, a couple of in-between weather updates, you just can't totally rely on whether she should come or should not come.
yeah,
We're under tornado warning with a hailstorm.
Here?
It's all over. It's literally like 15 counties across the coast.
What have I missed?
It was across the
You know, it's on all the TVs in the hospital.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it was like Monday.
We don't go to the
hospital. I was like, I had my test today. I was like, please, Sora, come over.
Yeah.
And I
Get me out of
this.
Oh my god, wow.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to put anybody in jeopardy, so.
Do you guys do integrity?
Yes, this one is what I can do. Listen, I'm happy to do the session for everybody who's here, but I'd say if you got to get on the road, you got to get out, and you're worried about it, I'm happy to put it to a vote, and what I can do is just, because most of the session is a video, where we're just going to talk through it. We're going to talk about various issues that are going to come up.
If we do the video, do we have to make them? Because I can't make them in the class.
Right. What I'm thinking is that we can, like I can make an assignment of some kind that will substitute for this
You're already here.
session. Yeah, you're here, so I mean that's what I'm saying. I'm
I don't want no
Yeah.
assignment
Okay.
loaded.
Let's do it. Okay, let's do it.
I'm here.
Let's do it, and let's just enjoy the weather.
They should be legalized for not.
They
No,
need,
no.
yes, but I think we'll enjoy the weather. We'll enjoy each other's company.
I think there's the majority of like the other students, and we just have a test on Friday because they're not here. So
It's
that.
always a test. There's always a test. There's always a new thing.
Now it's whether.
So the session actually, this is the last sort of modular session that we do, and what we do is we sort of we're taking we've spent a lot of time on big concepts, right? We started the year with international development. We talked about human rights. We talked about public health concepts, epidemiology, health systems, human resources. I mean, actually, if you think about the year, you guys have covered a ton of ground. And so what we do in this session is actually bring it down into getting you thinking about what you're going to do out in the field, especially as a potential volunteer in the health professions, going out and doing work in other countries, and sort of the considerations to take as you enter that world, and some of the things that we want you to think about. We sometimes, I never want this session to come off like we just assume that everybody's going to go off and cause problems when they go off and do international medical work. And most of the content is it's not meant to say, that we just assume those things, but the video is very, it's I'm not going to say that it's not positive or negative about U.S. volunteers that go off and do work in other countries. It's reflective, and it's meant to engender a discussion. And so I think that what you guys are going to do in your lives is extremely important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here doing this class, right? But it's very important to kind of circle back to what we talked about even in the first session, that even with the best of intentions, when you're going off to do short-term work, I think you have to measure expectations. You have to think about how well that work is perceived by your partners. And so this one is much more actionable. And we're gonna go through this video together, and we're gonna stop and have little discussions along the way. We're going to talk about ethics and human rights as they apply to global health work. This is where, I think most of us who have spent time in the field, this is like really the meat of global health coursework. We want to talk about the benefits and harms of medical volunteerism. Remind me who's spent time abroad. Most everybody has done some kind, and it was short-term work or long-term?
I've worked overseas, but never in like a healthcare capacity.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And yours was? Gotcha. Good. And we're talking a little bit about, it's going to be a little bit of personal reflection. So what are your motivations and how do they relate to your interest in global health? Some of the challenges that can arrive during short or long-term global health experiences. And then talk about the differences in cultural values and beliefs and how those influence disease. Now, some of the students have done a longer exercise on cultural competence. You guys have all heard this term, I'm assuming, right? It's sort of the buzzword of the last couple decades. And I like to break it down because honestly, I find the term I'm a little critical of this term. Well, what do you guys think about it? When someone says, hey, we're going to do an exercise on cultural competence, what does that make you? What's the immediate reaction?
Aware of other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, competition speak. Being aware of like other cultures.
What do you guys think? Yeah. It means like tolerance.
Yeah.
Like, I will know enough to tolerate. Yeah, actually, that's why I don't like it, is because even the way we teach it in the health professions, I don't know what your experience has been in CLS, but certainly in the medical school, the way it ends up panning out is that you get a test question and says you're seeing a person, a Hmong person from Southeast Asia, and they've recently immigrated and they have markings all over their body, and the answer is like they were beaten, they have hives, they have mumps. It's like they were cupping, because that's traditional medicine for those people, right? And that's now we're culturally competent because we've decided that every Hmong person does cupping, right? So I feel like there's a slippery slope into stereotyping and sort of, saying, well, every Arab person does this, and every Middle Eastern person does this, and every South American person does this, and I don't think that's sufficient. So I think it's important to us just to break it down. Culture is the template for the organization of social and psychological process, much like the genetic system provides such a template for the organization of organic processes. So most people who look at culture look at it as it's just a framework upon which society is built, just like your body has genetic code upon which your phenotype is built, right? And so culture is highly variable across the world. I think we've sort of addressed this in other sessions, but culture can be, we're in the United States, we're in Texas, and I'm a white guy, and there are other white people who have a very different culture than me, right? Because we're built on different cultural frameworks. So when we talk about cultural competence, it is this circle when you're trying to balance the culture and biases of the individual, the culture of the patient, the culture and culture of medicine or health. So the culture of healthcare is also an issue that comes to bear in cultural competence. And especially in international settings, it's important to understand the articulation of all of these things, your own personal culture and beliefs, the culture of the place that you're working in, and then even the culture of the health system and the attitudes towards healthcare that you're around. Skip that. I'm going to skip that. So actually, when we talk about cultural competence, it really is about it's really about you and your perspective. It's your beliefs, your values, and it's trying to avoid those, lumping people into those stereotypes. But really, we used to do I don't know if you guys have ever done the there's a what's the name of the assessment? We used to make you do it in class, but it's basically it's implicit bias. Have you heard of that term? So if you ever really want to just send yourself for a trip, get online and do an implicit bias test, and and you'll be pretty surprised, at it's.
Quiz that tells you
If you're a racist.
not racist, if you're not racist, if you're going.
Yeah, it
I
kind of
haven't
like gives
taken
you, it just tells you what your level of bias is.
Okay.
And and for me, it threw me for a loop because I'm like,
You're just like, what?
I'm like the most open-minded guy ever. And I'm like, I am not open-minded, right? And it doesn't mean that you should strive to be 100% open-minded. It's just about understanding where your biases are, right? And that's part of cultural competence is your own sort of where you are. So medical volunteerism, you guys have had some experience with this. So what I want to do is we're gonna start basically it's a movie, but it's a short, let's say a qualitative piece that was done by a group. It's been done. It was released about 6 years ago, with the idea that this was in a time where people have been studying now this process of students and other volunteers going overseas and doing medical work, and it's been largely ignored in most of the literature until really the last 10, 15 years, where people have gotten very interested because more and more people are doing it. You guys are part of a trend, a part of a movement that is just growing and growing. And there are a lot of reasons that it's probably growing. Well, what do you guys think? Why do you guys think more and more people, as you can see from this very busy room, but more and more people are really interested in getting involved in international work? Why do you think that is? Great. So like more international interconnectedness. I like that. What else?
It's also easier and cheaper to get cheaper. Yeah, flights are cheaper.
Much.
Is that called the shrinking of the world? Because the internet is the term for that.
Is that the Internet of Things? No, that's not the Internet of Things, is it?
I was going to say globalism or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
What else? So easier to get around. We're increasingly connected through.
And with the economy we see in our everyday lives, if you feel like we get something out of bands,
Uh-huh. Great.
it's just easier to do too because like before the internet, you became really active, like to try and figure out how to. There was a story when I lived in Vail, Colorado, about these two girls who through their high school went and did volunteerism in Peru, and then they had to like escape into the jungle and like hike for 2 days to get out because they just went through some local service that a guy had put. And now it's like you can research and get into international organizations. You don't have to just like look for a flyer or go down there and do it yourself. You can have a bunch of different options and choose your choice.
We support the safety.
Yeah.
I agree with that. What about you guys?
I think we're being more exposed to like different cultures, and I don't know. Like I think it's super cool, so I think a bunch of other people think it's super cool to go be exposed to something new and give back at the same time. It's
Yeah.
an awesome opportunity.
I agree with all those. I remember when I was, my first international experience, just stuff I had. There was no infrastructure to support what I did. This was back in the late '90s, and I was in a big city, but there's just stuff you shouldn't have been doing that you were doing, right? And now there's way more scrutiny on programs like ours. Like we are held to a certain standard when there are actually international guidelines now, consensus-based guidelines on what we as a program need to do to make sure that you are safe when you go on an experience and that the people there on the ground are safe from you, right? Not to say that you would ever intentionally do anything bad, but if you're ever in a place, it doesn't matter what health profession you are. If you're a gringo coming to a place where there aren't other people, you may be called upon to do things that are outside your scope, and that's probably not fair to you. It's probably not fair to the people that are supposedly getting the service, right? So it's there's a lot of scrutiny on the ethics of international engagement now, and programs like ours. So what I always try to, the takeaway from this, I keep belaboring it, but is that a lot of these things, there are a lot of these things that many of the programs here wouldn't expose you to because of the way that we do international work. But the fact that it has been done in the past has created in some places a precedent that's hard to break out of. And I can think of 100 different, not 100, but at least 4 different examples. So I'm going to pull up this video. Did he? Nope. Let me just pull it up and we'll get it started and we'll kind of take little breaks. Any questions or thoughts before we move on? On the video. Just make sure. Whoa.
Africa, a continent of untamed wilderness, colorful cities, enigmatic cultures, heartrending poverty, and more volunteer aid and development organizations than almost anywhere else in the world. With Western media as our guide, Africa is often reduced to a homogeneous set of photo ops with endlessly grateful men, women, and children who simply couldn't go on without our $15.95 a month. This is a stark contrast to our other Africa, of $600 a night safari lodges and several $1,000 treks up Mount Kilimanjaro. Many of us in the West understand Africa and other developing regions to be simultaneously intriguing and in desperate need of help. Volunteering becomes an adventure with the bonus of feeling we've done good. Health professionals can be particularly susceptible to this volunteer tourism. So, medical tourism has multiple meanings. It can be anything from, we see in the media where people are going to location A to have surgery, for example. But it also can be students or faculty who are going for a quick time to do clinical work. Increasingly, medical students and aspiring medical students are seeking opportunities to become involved in global health. This isn't surprising, as many students want a career in medicine because it's a profession of helping. But in an overwhelming desire to do good in the world, the presumption that, as medical students, we can help may be naive at best and detrimental at worst.
Come and see how we can work together. But don't come to try to change us overnight. You want to do it. Some feel that if they go back and collect some money and send it here to solve the problem, it's a little bit bigger than that. They won't solve the health insurance problem by collecting some money. So health, and come and work with us. We have issues, limitations and challenges, but look at it in a way where you can add on and step at a time. And sometimes you add in on this, recognizing that Africa is out there. It needs a little more than what we have. One day when you are older, when you are more influential, when you are consultant, look at a way you can come out and help Africa.
I just want to point out kind of that word medical tourism. Had you heard that before? And what do you hear when you hear that? Huh? Oh, that kind of medical tourism. Like people going for procedures. Yeah, absolutely. India, there's a lot of, even in South Latin America, there have cropped up a lot of these sort of for-profit entities.
And like experiencing that tourism portion, but the volunteer tourism is huge. Like where it's actually surprising you'll pay like 3 times what the vacations even cost to go down and help out. I don't even know where usually they're out around the world.
Yeah.
And then, the money, I guess, goes to whatever place you signed up for.
Mm-hmm. So those are actually 2 brands. So some people call medical tourism, some people, it's just they're confused them. Like medical tourism can be going somewhere for procedure, but more commonly now we're using it to describe sort of the volunteer tourism, the more like even poverty voyeurism. You've heard of, like, there are a lot of things that have cropped up, let's take you to an orphanage so you can see the orphans and play, it feels like that should be a great thing, but in fact, there's more scrutiny on it. I won't say it's all bad because I've certainly sent students to orphanages though, but in very different contexts than where you're going to go and play with kids for an afternoon and then that's it, right?
I just had a quick question. I was looking into my option to go in Africa coming spring, Dr. Freeman. I was looking at an expense of almost $3,500 to $4,000. So just for that whole short trip of, it's not even required for me to do this. It's just a volunteer
Yeah.
tourism, like we term it. And I'm looking at an expense out of pocket, $4,000 just to go and serve somebody. And now I'm in double minds. I lose my pay. I'll be double jacked with my curriculum because the school is on.
Yeah.
And then plus paying $4,000 to go and help somebody. So this balance out.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a mandatory thing. It's not a class that requires to do this.
Right.
So how does this balance out? How is it going to ever benefit me? I mean, how does this work? Okay, being on mankind helping out is a different story. You see what I'm saying?
Totally.
Beginning of the spring,
Yeah.
missing out of school for 2-3 weeks, which I'll be like bombarded with.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that the programs that, like for example, what Dr. Freeman does are not tourism. I mean, they're going to put you to work
Yes.
on projects that are even training people, working in the lab. I mean, that's way different than going and dispensing ibuprofen.
So yeah, that's
right?
a total work, setting up something. And
But it is expensive, and that is, and you're exactly right. I mean, that's even all of our students that go and do these experiences have to grapple with that. Well, what do I want to get out of it? What do I think it's going to help? I mean, I encourage students to think about that carefully. I usually tell students that I look at it as an investment in an experience that is formative and that's important, that's going to help you become a better clinician, a better scientist, a better health professional, is going to give you some perspective on the world. But it has to be worth that investment.
so I just wanted to learn something more about me before making my decision because I know there were 2 students who went. So I'm hearing different opinions. There are faculty who would say they lag behind in the school semester. They are struggling this semester big time. So I'm like, what do I choose?
Exactly. No, I think that those are good things so hopefully we don't totally dissuade you from doing it by watching these videos.
No, I mean, I really, because I've never done something like this and I'm a late bloomer. And I was also looking into I found out one institute in India too that I'm going to work more.
Yeah.
It's funded by an NRI, a non-residential Indian from here, and he allows American students, nursing, School of Medicine, all of us, to go and work there and get their experience. I've had a couple of my friends' kids go there. I'm going to look into that and give the information for our school.
Yeah. I mean, it's we always anyway, we'll go into partnerships a little later, but I always caution people on one-off things because my thought is that that students should be part of an institutional initiative. Students should be supporting things that are going to way outlast that student, right? So that the partner gets something out of it that's not just a visitor. You know what I'm saying? Like when we partner with a place in Uganda, we are, I go there, our faculty go there. We're writing papers together. We're trying to bring their students here, involving them in possible research projects. Looking at ways to fund things, and it's a longer term commitment. And we've had a few students a lot of students come to us. I'd say in the School of Medicine, say, well, I know this person who runs this thing, and it's got this great opportunity. And what do you think? And I always look at it, but usually I'll say, what is this going to
Bring to us.
Not bring to us, but how is the institution going to be able to commit to, how is the partner going to benefit from this? Besides just receiving a student. And sometimes that's all they want. But if a partner, I'm always thinking, right, if a partner just wants me to send students, I'm not really sure what their objective is and what benefit they're doing. So it's not to say don't do it. I'd say just you want to look into those kind of things and ask. Hopefully after this we'll have instilled in you enough questioning. It's not about turning you off to them, because I never say no, but it's always, what are the questions we need to ask to make sure that that's going to be the right thing for me and the right thing for that person. So no, it's great.
Part of the reason I didn't come to Akron is because I always wanted to go here as a tourist. So I did play into a lot of the exchange programs went to South America as well, but I've been there in the past, and I've always wanted to go see Tanzania and see Kenya, so it definitely was a factor within my choice to come here.
Honestly, I think my reason was probably more selfish than Liz. I wanted to come to Africa, and I wanted to volunteer. And I think everyone who is doing the medical placement here has to admit a little bit that it looks good on a resume. So, I mean, obviously I wanted to experience the culture, I wanted to learn about it, I wanted to help out, but I can't say that it was entirely selfless.
There's these conflicting motivations. A lot of times people genuinely have a desire to work with and for communities, but there's also people who want to have a cultural experience, who want to pad the resume, who want to secure research funds, who want to get into a professional school. That's a big one as well. There's a huge, either a perceived or a real need to have these experiences. There's often a section on med school applications or dental school applications or even law to have these experiences where you've engaged with vulnerable communities before.
What Liz and Allie describe is what many of us who travel to do medical work in developing countries may be afraid to admit. Not only do we want to help, but we want to see, and we want to experience the exotic. And despite our wanting to do good, we may not be aware of the consequences of our actions.
And so often we prioritize, having an impact, go and you'll have such a great impact. And then you don't have the qualifier of what kind of impact you're having.
So look at when we talk about medical tourism, although there are many different definitions to that term, the way that I'm using it right now is to think about short-term medical interventions that take place in resource-poor settings and are led by health professionals that come from resource-rich settings. So, in particular, we look at medical students involved in quote-unquote medical tourism. We're talking about medical students that participate in the direct care provision for patients in resource-poor environments when they're coming from a resource-rich environment.
Part is what I call medical voyeurism, where we go to observe other people, and not necessarily, we go as tourists, not because we have a commitment to that community, but because we want to see. And that's kind of like people stopping at an accident site and watching and not doing anything to help. And to me, that's really disrespectful of those cultures and those communities, and that's one thing that I would like to see change. And I think the way to do that is to have educators basically take responsibility and start thinking about ethics and think about, just would you want this in your community? Would you want people coming to your emergency room, for example, just to see trauma victims and to watch and see what it's like? Or would you want them there because they want to learn and they want to help?
I once had an experience in Tanzania where there were students who wanted to go into the labor ward because there's so many births there in comparison to what you'd see here. And I let my colleague know this at the university that we partner with in Tanzania, and he said to me very directly, he's like, this is not a zoo. And that was a real wake-up call for me, and it was a real wake-up call for the students to say, okay, this isn't a zoo, this is not a place where you can look in on things that you wouldn't normally be able to see. And I think that, any human's privacy and dignity and all of that should be respected no matter where you go. And I think sometimes it's the concept comes along that, I'm going to a developing country, so it's okay. They won't mind. They'll be happy that somebody from the Western world, that Western medicine is there. And I think that that's an idea that really just needs to be discussed and debunked before people go overseas.
Students get carried away. Many of them want to take out their cameras. These days, cameras, and before long you have it on some website, someplace. those ethical issues that come up. It's not as easy as people think, because you go to that environment, you have your camera ready, and you see these things. I must have a picture of this, and then we forget all of the things that you would necessarily have to do here. And that is the greatest danger, that students feel liberated once they get to these environments. So all the rules and regulations that limit your access in a country like this, you suddenly feel liberated. You can do anything you want. And sometimes in some of these countries, the gentleness of the people there, and so they don't want to tell you that you can't do those things.
It's very exotic to go abroad. And this gets back to the medical tourism thing. There's a lot of people that really want to travel and see the world, and that's great. And people should do that. They just shouldn't do it under the guise of going somewhere and helping someone for a week or two, in an unsustainable fashion. I think that.
Thoughts? What resonated? Yeah. Is that something that we've experienced? I certainly have. I mean, I've been on the sending end when I've gone to evaluate a site, and I've traveled with a group and seen kind of what the interesting. The example is I use the Dominican Republic, where I work a lot and receives a lot of short-term mission groups, and it's interesting because the partner there has figured out that that's what people want, and so has created an entire system to facilitate groups going out and providing short-term service. And so the question, that's why I think this is like not necessarily as black and white now, because that's the partner saying, well, that's what I want you to do. But in fact, is that what's best for the community? And who gets to tell him that? It's a tough one. But what resonated for you about medical voyeurs?
No, it's just so true, and just like how do you stop it? Like soothe it. It's just like it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't know, like the people that I worked with, like they set up like year rounds and had people that lived there year round and did a bunch of other things like taught English and stuff, and just were there and like learned like the native language. And but then they encourage people to stay longer, like at least like 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
But it's still short-ish term. And it's just like, I don't know, it's embarrassing.
It's a tough one.
I guess what resonated with me was sustainability, because in my travels, I've heard or seen about different Western-based volunteer groups. I'm not saying they're medical, but they come in and they build a well, or they help a school, or they do something without truly understanding the culture and what's going on within the country, and then they leave, and then that community that they just built up gets attacked with the neighboring community for their water rights. Or, they don't think about the long-term impact of what they're doing. And like an instance, this is slightly different, but they always talk about like when you travel, like don't tip somebody $100 in a really poor country, because this seems like this amazing, wonderful thing to do. But to them, that's a year's salary. Can you imagine being tipped a year's salary and what would happen? So you have to think about your actions in terms of what is the long-term impact? Is it something that can be sustained? Can it be sustained? And then, am I really helping that person or not?
Yeah.
When I think I am.
Ask them if they don't need it, or like, you need this.
Yeah.
Or even if they need water, like you're providing something that you think they need. Do you really understand what's going on within that community, in that country? I have a friend who does a lot of volunteer work in the Congo, and she like basically almost disavows most large volunteer corporations, like they just don't get it.
Yeah.
Like it's just they can't. The concept of what it's really like to live in a war-torn country.
I don't think people want to know.
I sat in the airport in Nairobi and had a beer with someone who had just, it was Gringo Creek. It was basically you end up at the same little tiny table together and like, where can I sit? She had just come out of the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. You can imagine the experiences they have and on the ground and say, how can we fix this in a week or two? So there is that perspective. What about this is not a zoo? When I first saw that, I said, oh man. Because you could think, I can think of all these times that, my first experience is going into the field and saying, I want to see how healthcare is practiced here. I do want to see it. It's one of the reasons I'm here. And boy, if someone told me that, I'd say, wow, what did I just do? Right? So, anything else?
So would you get frustrated, or would you be feeling helpless, or would you be like, because you're there short term, what are you going to do?
Well, that's the question. So that's why I'm saying many of these students shouldn't. That's why I'm saying, like, if the experience takes place in the setting of a very good partnership, like when I send students to Kenya, they know exactly what students I'm sending, what they can do and what they will be doing, what they should be expected to know and not know. Because I go there and, I meet and I say, what kind of students do you want and what do you want to be doing and how do you want to evaluate them, how do you want them prepared, and if you can do that, then, the reason that we require this of any students that we send is that way you're not faced with those
So it's
dilemmas.
connections that you're talking about in Kenya, the Nairobi, in
Yeah.
Meru, right?
Well, in Meru,
Yeah,
in Maua
okay.
and in Nairobi.
Mau, yeah, from Meru.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but yes, I mean, that's the thing. It's the sustainability bit that, if you're a student, you're a part of something that someone else has been doing for a long time, it's generally much more gravy than if it's a parachute type thing, right? Where it's like, well, what do I do? What do you expect from me? Well, then that's a tough conversation for a student to have with a host who may or may not have the time to be able to give them that type of input.
I think that there are lots of questions to ask, and I think that students also really need to ask themselves those questions about what's my motivation? Why do I want to do this? Is it for my CV, or is it, to truly further my knowledge of global health? Is it vacation? And it's okay to, do a global health experience and also put a vacation on it, but the global health experience is not actually a vacation. I think that that's what students also need to realize.
So the question of whether, when you're working clinically, whether you're going abroad to see exotic diseases, just to talk about them at dinner parties or in the presence of colleagues, or just to have that kind of experience in your back pocket, versus going abroad to get exposure to things that you're actually going to subsequently utilize.
Global health, within the larger world of aid, is entrenched in moral presuppositions, making our motivations to engage in it very difficult to question or to contest. But asking why we choose to participate is essential. Despite good intentions, working in under-resourced areas may not be a priori a good thing. Questioning can be very uncomfortable, and the answers may be unexpected, especially when the ethical waters are muddied by competing motivations.
Like what is the reason that you're going over? Like what are you hoping to achieve? And by doing so, are you caught?
I don't want to be distracting, but I have to say this. So she's clearly either in Uganda or in Tanzania, in like a dorm or something. And as her interview goes on, like they come back to her a few times. It's getting later at night, and like the bullfrog sounds outside get deafening. So I don't want to distract you. I've watched this like 100 times, but I always think that's entertaining. All the bullfrogs.
More harm, or are you doing good? I mean, all of us come with the intention of helping out, and that's what we really want to do. But when you really stand back and
look at it like how much help are we really doing. When students come in and they say, I want to go overseas because I want to make a difference, I have them break that down. What does that mean? What does a difference mean? What are really your learning objectives? And maybe those learning objectives can be met within Canada. You know, you don't necessarily need to go overseas. So it's really looking at what the learning is and what would be the best environment for the student. And that learning environment, like I said, maybe here, it could be overseas, but being very clear about the learning objectives.
The other aspect is that when people are coming with a service mentality, they're typically accompanied with good intentions. Something I like to talk about is that good intentions are insufficient as a premise from which we can decide to pursue these global health projects. Because just because we have good intentions doesn't mean we have the experience and knowledge, the breadth of worldview to actually contribute something of value.
Even our best intentions to help may be based on a paternalism created by the Western media barrage out of Africa and other developing regions that creates an image of vulnerability and need among the people exposed. It demands that we help them, a moral imperative.
One of the things we lack the most in the healthcare professional, among healthcare professionals, is humility. You know, you go to a remote area and the young doctor knows as much as you do. And you wonder, well, I have all the books, I have all the journals, I have internet at my beck and call. I have 100 senior doctors teaching me. This guy has one person. And he doesn't have internet, and he doesn't have the journals. How did he know this? You know, and you come back with that humility.
And I also believe that one of the biggest learning opportunities is realizing that in a developing country, it's not all poverty. That we have an incredible number of partners with experience and training that is above and beyond our own experience and training. So one of the pieces that students learn is there are great partners, and they are there to learn, and they will gain a lot through that learning experience. And that piece, I think, surprises many of us.
My recommendation for medical students going on electives is to consider it entirely as an experience of education rather than an experience of service. Because I think there's something important to say about an approach. And if you go into an experience with the expectation that you are going to help or that you're going to serve a particular population, I think that removes an element of your humility.
I guess the
Thoughts?
I think often when people get into volunteer work, and this would be just my perspective, that there's like a sense of like, I'm helping this poor unfortunate soul. I could just do so much for them. And I think like looking at things like within Western or not even Western, just any like, well, I'm helping the poor. It doesn't even be within our own communities. There's sometimes like there's a sense of self-gratification with entitlement that we're like, well, I'm helping out this person and I'm just doing wonderful work. And I see it in various aspects within the U.S. and outside. That I think when you take a step back and don't look at it as service, look at it as like, that's kind of why I like volunteering sometimes. I'm learning from them so much. And messing up a lot, but learning from them, and instead of looking at it as like, well, I'm helping these poor unfortunate souls, I look at it as like, I'm helping somebody and I'm taking something out of it that's really good.
Yeah.
But I do see, especially within certain, not to count out religious organizations, but within certain religious organizations, there's a certain, we have the right way of doing things. I'm here to help these poor people, lead them to the freedom. Yeah.
There's a, in fact, I got sent an an email today from the legal department. Someone wanted to set up a program or an exchange in Uganda. And I looked at the organization. It's a very, it's a Christian evangelical organization that's building a hospital, but primum objective is evangelism. And I just said, wow. Who am I to say who you partner with? But I'm just saying. Not saying, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, and I would think Utah and the Mormon volunteerism is required mission at 18 and we go all over, and it's volunteerism, but it definitely comes from a place of not all of them. This is just a very, very broad generalization, but there's a sense of security and of like I'm helping out this very poor community and doing some things, and they come back, especially at 18. They come back just this. I did my mission here.
Oh, you did your mission in Sweden? Cool. So terribly.
It's interesting because there's different models of that kind of volunteerism, missionaries. And we're quite close with an organization that's basically, it's called the African Mission Healthcare Foundation to support mission hospitals in Southern Africa, or in Sub-Saharan Africa. But their model is so different that, yes, they are faith-based, and so they're motivated by mission. But what you notice is that actually a lot of the missionaries that go through, African Inland Church and a lot of these, that they actually take a year to prepare. There's like a training program. Take 6 months to a year just to learn. They don't learn the culture. They don't learn the culture of the place they're going. They learn how to learn about culture. They don't learn the language. They learn how to learn a language. And they learn how to integrate with a population. And then they go and they serve not for a month or two. They go for 5 years.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And so it's a very different model. So, and it certainly comes from a place of mission, but the outcome is partnership and sustained effort, rather than sort of the drop in, drop out.
My friend's son, Denisha, is doing that. Like he can't say that he's a missionary there because it's a Christian. And so he went and did that whole program and everything, but he became a secret And I was like, what?
There are a bunch of wonderful religious organizations. So I just see some of them that I've seen are just, there's sometimes just too much. There's just security. Sometimes happens.
Sometimes there are challenges when you are going out as social workers, because I know my cousins have been into this, and the first one had to give up because she was traumatized due to the cultural differences or whatever, and she was trying to help some women being beaten up or whatever in Peru, whatever. I don't remember the country, but one of the South American countries that she was volunteering. And she was sent by the U.S. government to volunteer there. And so whatever happened, she was just trying to be working and helping, and she was teaching women and blah blah blah, which was not acceptable to that culture. They traumatized her so bad that she had a little kitty cat. She was sent there for a longer period of time. They came and they slit the throat of the cat in front of her. And so next time it's your throat and stuff like that. And she was traumatized so bad that the U.S. government had to airlift her because she practically was so sick out there, and she was scared to death over there by those local people because she was educating the women, the girls, teaching them the sanitization part. But it was all funded through the U.S. government and stuff like that. She gave up her career of social work. At that time, this is a story before 8 or 9 years, the younger one picked up the path. My younger cousin picked up the path. She said, you quit social work, I will pick up the path. She picked up, she was in Manitoba for 2 years, volunteering.
Where?
Manitoba, near New Zealand, November. Yeah, and it's amazing how she lived in that country where no flip-flops also, or no clothes also, and she did amazing over there. And just last week, my aunt sent me a clipping of her on the ABC News of her trying to rescue a homeless and having somebody on drugs having a baby and saving the babies. So now she's at a different level doing social work. But they go through a lot trying to help people. So I'm like, why? And what do you do when you're
Well, that's the question
like
is, what form does the help take? It's like what you guys were saying before. I think whenever I hear a story like that, I first want to know, well, you have to know the context, right? Before you pass a judgment, you have to know, well, first of all, you come with USAID, it doesn't always mean that the doors are open for you.
The thing is, she's pretty colored. She's so dark,
Sure.
like those local Mexican or whatever.
Sure.
She's darker than I am. She would look no different.
Sure.
She would look no different than the localites there. She's not even light colored.
So some of it is come with a program you come with. Some of it is the project. So
Yeah.
Domestic abuse is profound. It's a lightning rod. It is a lightning rod. If you touch it, sometimes you can handle it. Sometimes you're going to get shot, right? And so there was a group that we were working with in Uganda. I remember this very distinctly because I went for a site visit to the place, and we were talking, and they said, we're seeing a lot of women coming in victims of domestic abuse. I said, oh yeah, man, let's do a project. Let's do some funding. Let's work together. And I started talking to people on the ground, and they said, don't touch it. I said, don't touch it. I said, can you imagine a group of Wazungus running around like doing interviews? What kind of sometimes, especially in domestic violence, not that we shouldn't address it, but sometimes the interventions, the studies,
It's really not your fault. Like, you as an outsider to fix.
Exactly. So you take paternalism to a whole new level. You're going to tell me what I can and can't do with my wife? Well, yes, I am, because there's this thing called the Declaration of Human Rights, and the Declaration of Human Rights says that women shouldn't have to be beaten and blah, blah, blah. But is that their Declaration of Human Rights? We talked about this in the human rights thing. It's like, well, a bunch of gringos in Switzerland, in Geneva, wrote that. That's not from my culture, right? So,
back alive.
right, and so you could imagine that, you get dropped into something that's maybe hasn't been managed well before you got there. It can be real tough. So those are volunteer experiences that can sometimes go very
She
bad.
was big into volunteerism, and she totally got so scared.
But that's the point, is that the willingness to help and the good intentions are not always going to be good enough. You can have the best of intentions, but if the program you go with is ham-handed and they haven't done things right and they haven't set things up well for you, it can make your experience a total nightmare. So good stuff.
Point was that we're medical students. We don't have any skills, real skills. Like, we can't do any prescription writing and stuff like that. So we need the support of the community in Arusha, and because the resources are already so low that we take resources away, and we gain a lot from the experience. We learn a lot. We get to see all the people, and are we really just coming and kind of like poking into these people's lives and then leaving? So that was like the big ethical question.
Shouldn't see this sojourn as, it's a nice place, Tanzania, some good beaches, some nice wildlife, and I just go there because it offers me the chance to travel. I think if this happens now, it's detrimental for this country because it binds a lot of resources.
By coming to learn in under-resourced areas, medical students risk stressing a system already short on funding, and perhaps more importantly, short on health professionals needed to teach local students who are more likely to stay in the area and provide ongoing service. And students aren't the only ones who risk draining the systems they visit. Physicians and volunteers in other sectors may take more than they give, particularly in short-term initiatives.
So the North American students were a bit frustrated that they don't get enough time with the physicians. We're a bit frustrated that they went whereas our students had a different.
What's the impact on the training of healthcare professionals in the location where you are visiting when you visit? So does your presence create a drain on the healthcare system? For example, are there nursing staff, if you're a medical student, are there nursing staff that are providing translation services for you while you're in direct interaction with the patient, and what really that nurse, given her expertise, should be probably involved in her own work rather than facilitating your potentially irrelevant interaction with a patient that you probably won't be able to directly help given your level of training. Is there a medical, say you're in Tanzania, is there a Tanzanian medical student that would be benefiting from this patient interaction if you, the visiting medical student, were not in that position? And I think the tricky part for medical students is that potential drains on the system are not readily apparent during your experience. So personally, I did a medical elective in Arusha in Tanzania. I recently had the opportunity to meet a dean of a medical school in Tanzania, shall remain nameless at the moment, but he was explaining to me that his number of visiting students matches the number of actual Tanzanian medical students. And because of that one-to-one ratio, the students are disadvantaged in terms of supervisors, in terms of even lecture time. So that was definitely not readily apparent to me when I was in.
When physicians come, we sometimes find that some take up a little more time than they need. Either they need to move with a current physician, do everything together, and even after the ward work has been done, they want someone to be with them, take them. They find that, I won't say babysitting them, but some people here feel that we don't want people who are going to babysit. We want people who come and work with us. We give them a batch of students to teach. We show them what to do, and they can teach them without me having to stand next to that physician. Otherwise, you don't get much. Both of us are doing the same thing.
And I'm sure that happens in the nonprofit sector as well. You know, you're so busy keeping new students, new volunteers in the loop, and so busy trying to bring them up to speed and get them to learn the language and get them to understand the project that's going on. You know, by the time they're actually competent enough to, you know, carry the torch, it's time to go home.
Even when they commit their services to a host country, health professionals from Western countries can inadvertently undermine local health professionals by bringing the appearance, whether true or not, of better care to patients desperate for more.
One of the things that I worried about was that patients don't know who we are. If they think we're, you know, the white doctors from USA or from Canada, and we show up and we start looking at their files, I'm worried that they get a false sense that we're going to come in and come up with a miracle cure. So I think it's very important that they know that we're students and we're learning. I had one moment where I think Kelly and Jen and I were just reading a patient's file and sort of discussing it, and she was sort of looking up at us, and I thought that maybe she thought we were going to do something different than the doctors there and fix her child. And so I just that made me think about the effect of us, even just being in the room, and how the patients would react to us.
So the first time we went and we met with the Upendo group, we went to their church where they all meet, and they were so gracious and thankful and like lovely to us that it was a little overwhelming, because they would be like, oh, you know, you've come and you are saving our lives, like the work you do here is like so wonderful. And we were like, whoa, like we do nothing of this sort. And so that's very overwhelming. They put a lot of trust in us, and it gives them a lot of hope that something will be done, and that scares me.
Thoughts?
Undermining the local existing infrastructure, the clinical structure they have. Like that's something we never even travel. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Like, look where you look, you're like, American, like, TV doctor, like, white coat, and then, like, it's like, you're a first year student.
Yeah, and that's definitely happens. I've had students that have been in that situation, even under the best and ideal circumstances. They're at the bedside. You know, kind of sometimes it calls into question decisions that are being made, and say, well, what do you think? And it's like an awkward position to be in. And then the part that usually sticks out for people is also the part about, am I taking away resources? I think that's a tough one. I think there's two sides to that one, right? I think there's times where probably institutions like ours may overload a site, but sometimes sites, they are. There's a site that we were thinking of sending students to in Peru, in Cusco, and we decided not to because the hospital charges them a rotation fee, and then just floods the wards with them, and then they don't do anything with them. So it's the students there's all these gringos walking around. It's Cusco, so it's a super touristy place. They want to come to Cusco anyway, but then they're like, well, let me get my medical experience out of it, and the hospital's only happy to charge them for it, but they're not looked upon favorably by the local docs who are like, what are you doing here? You're just, basically it's just a source of money. I think that's also a dangerous slope as well. So, I used to face that all the time in the ward where, I was the supervising physician, but I was trying to empower our residents, the folks that I was working with in Botswana. This is your patient. This is not my patient. But there was that. What do you think, doctor? And I'm like, well, this is your doctor. It's tough. It's tough. Those are tough relationships to negotiate.
Well, there's just sometimes the perception that there's just stories that everybody hears about someone's affected for this miraculous new surgery that's being done here or there, and so people are going there to learn and to distribute, but they're not necessarily bringing miracle medicine,
Yeah.
down.
There's so many unintended. We sent students to Kenya to Malua, and this was about 4 years ago, and they were just so struck. They met this patient and her mom. The patient was a young girl, about 6 months old at that time, who had been the mom and family had been cooking in an indoor stove, and basically the kid had gotten into it and had like 75% burns. Just never should have made it, but was making it, and they were just like, wow. This mission hospital in a small community the family didn't have the resources to get to Nairobi, and they said we got to do something, and so they got the shrine involved. They pitched it to the Shriners here at the burn hospital and said, can you bring her name? Her name was Baby Angel, right? So go there, right? So they said, can we bring Angel and her mom so that she can get treatment here? And honestly, it was miraculous because they did. The students ran it. And they got in touch with church groups and the Freemans, and everybody sort of mobilized around it. It just happened. And they got plane tickets, they got visas, they came here. So then the unintended consequences flowed in, right? So, so treatments took a long time. So they were here 3 months. Then mom didn't want to go back.
Oh boy.
Right? Because she was like, oh, this
is a nice place to be.
This is nice. And how is she going to continue to get this care in Kenya? Now, our Kenyan colleagues who live in Nairobi said she can get this care. She could have gotten all of this at Nairobi Hospital. So it didn't need to come all the way to the shrine. It could have been done in country. And we knew that, but these students were pushed. They were like, no, we got to do the shrine. And it's the world class, and we want the best for Angel. Then the other was on the program side. The physicians were like, yeah, we had to sort of calm people down in the community because they were like, oh, if you go there, they'll take you to the States and for your care. If you can't, they'll pay for it. So it's just all of these, like there was great intentions, and then and it's all been fine, right? Like amnesia is great because, institutional amnesia is awesome because at some point all the people change over and nobody remembers what happened. But for about a year, it was when I made visits, it was kind of like, we got to figure out how to. The hospital was doing some community damage control a little bit, so yeah, those sort of things come up, right?
What a
right?
flirtation, right?
But you never want to dissuade people, right? Like you want them to.
You can never even imagine it was all in good faith.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes we forget that these countries, although they might be in the forefront of the world, there are other resources that are not the United States to get quality care.
Yep.
Like there is alternatives. We do have amazing research facilities. We do have like top ones and things, but that doesn't mean proper care can be received.
Yeah. In fact, if they were really thinking about, in countries first, but then, what else is in the Eastern Hemisphere? Well, New Delhi, Bombay, which
I
have
was
some
just
of the.
reading after you said the medical.
Yeah.
I looked it up. I don't think 3 billion in 2015, and by 2020 it's like what 7 billion. Like India took the medical tourism.
Yeah.
I'm like, boy.
See.
I only knew people went there for medical colleges. I didn't.
Oh yeah, no.
And I only knew Indians go there for infertility treatment and stuff like that. I didn't know it was this big. Okay, I'll be very honest to you.
Yeah, no, it's big.
Emotions. Many of them look at a patient and watch a patient dying of a problem that could have been easily handled in their country, and many of them are badly affected by this. And the worst part is that our patients are young people. The mean age or median age for patients with admitted is about 33 years.
I think the challenge there is just students coming from a different setting where everything is sort of perfect, and then they come here and some people, their world just falls apart and they can't totally believe what's going on.
There's a lot of things looking back that we should have done more of. We spent a lot of our time doing fundraising work, which was important because the money goes here and the money goes to sending us here, but in terms of preparation of culture, of language, and stuff like that, I wish we had done more of.
Preparing for these challenges demonstrates respect for host communities and can mitigate negative impacts. Students are at further risk of having a negative impact, however, when they engage in clinical activities beyond their level of training.
I have known students who've applied to medical school, been involved in being involved in surgery, taking history, being involved in clinical practice that they are not even engaged in the training for. And that is an extreme situation, but it's not uncommon.
We didn't really have a good idea, we knew the name of our placement, but we didn't really know what exactly we'd be doing, or how long we'd be working, or where, or the kind of stuff we were expected to know. Because you come here, my first day, within 20 minutes of being in the hospital, I was given a needle, told to take a blood sample. I was like, well, I'm not trained to do this. I'm still an undergrad student. They're like, just go.
My first day at the hospital, the doctor just said, come over here. And there was a woman in labor. And he said, put on gloves. And I put on gloves. And he said, now grab the head. And I said, okay. And then he just said, now pull. And I delivered the baby. And that was essentially within, 10 minutes? 10 minutes of walking into the hospital on my first day, I delivered the baby.
And I was terrified. But the thing is, I was in a room, there were 2 nurses there, and the doctor was gone. 3 women went into labor at the same time, so the 2 nurses delivered the other 2 women. There's a woman there with no one to help her deliver a baby. So I'm unskilled, but I could support her choice between like me and no one. There are different standards because there have to be different standards. I'm not saying it's right, but it's better than nothing else.
As a student, you are guided by the curriculum within your university. So if you were a Dalhousie student, you are very aware of what the parameters of your training are. And that doesn't matter if you're working at the Children's Hospital here in Halifax or if you're working at the Children's Wing in Tanzania. You are guided by the same set of parameters. We forget that when we are in another environment.
And I believe that it doesn't have to be medical violence. I think that there's no such intention. I don't think that when it happens and it falls smack into the confines of medical violence, that nobody intended it to be that way. It's just taking the opportunity that you didn't expect that you would get this opportunity. You know, you are a second year student, for example, you end up in a country like Guyana, and the surgeon is more than willing to take you into the theater. You know, they're doing open heart surgery, and they let you in and allow you to start handling things, and so that wouldn't happen here. And you start looking into things, you start taking pictures and so on. These are the reasons why it has to be structured, so that the students and the facilitators understand the parameters within which we work. Whenever these things happen, that we can call medical violence, some people call them cowboy medicine or something like that, it's because we don't work with structured elements. We do not have the parameters established. But let me just say that quite unequivocally.
Any thoughts? Stories?
Well, like, for me, especially with them, like, asking them to do procedures and stuff like that, like these students, I feel like a lot of them are really naive, and, like, they weren't really told exactly what their role was. So in one way, like, they shouldn't have done that, like, it's very unsafe, but at the same time, like, I almost feel like they didn't know what they were supposed to, like, what they signed up for when they went on this trip, you know? So it's kind of like, it's not their fault, but, like, it is their fault, but also someone else above them is kind of at fault there for not telling them, hey, this is your role, you're supposed to watch, you're not supposed to inject people, like, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and even over there, like, the hospital, like, people on staff, they should know these are students, like, they are not here to assist in anything. Like, and for me, like, if I'm there in that situation, someone's like, go hold this baby's head. I mean, if I say no, like, there's going to be a huge miscommunication there, you know?
Yeah.
You kind of feel, like, under this pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at students. Like,
Yeah.
What do you do? Like, you're like, what am I supposed to do? It's the same as, like, you got stuck in a subway car with a woman in labor.
That's what I was saying, like, in your car,
in labor, just go for it, please. So it's like, if you're there and you can help, like, you know, you're like
good
help,
scenario, right?
But at the same time, the fact that they were even put in that position is bad.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, you know, and then, I mean, you can see the one with the bangs that went like this. She's really proud.
She's smiling.
And it's like, I mean, I'm sure it was a rush, it was this experience, but instead of, like, stepping back and being like, whoa,
Yeah.
I'm way out of my element here, or something like that, you can see them being like, well, that's just kind of how it is here. We just deliver babies.
You could tell that the other one who was, you know, put in that situation where they're like, put gloves on. You know,
Yeah.
She was a little traumatized.
Yeah.
And the other one was kind of like, well, I was the only one there. The other
Yeah.
one was like, good. And then the other one
That was a
like,
good imitation.
Yeah, like, I was my sister's birth and I was traumatized. Like, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Like, that was in a control setting. So, like, some students, like, that can literally end their, it could be their, like, well, I'm not ready for med school.
I'm out.
I'm not suited to be a doctor. That was, like, awful. But where it's from, hey. I was traumatized that my sister's own birth and it was in a hospital. So, yeah, things like that. So, I guess, like, it can, instead of something that's been positive for the community and positive for the students, run well. You can make this
Totally.
awful. And then what are your choices then?
Yeah.
Excuse me, no, do that by yourself.
I didn't sign up for that. You can do it, baby.
I mean, it's cool.
It is a hard negotiation, right? So I mean, the majority we send we send senior students, but the majority of students we send are junior students. And so the 2+2 model for medical, I'll say for medical students, is very different than in many of these countries where they're entering clinical work after maybe year one. They're very quickly involved in clinical work as medical students, midwife students, nurse students. They learn classroom, but they don't stay in the classroom for 2 years. They have some class and they're out there and they're doing it, and it's a different model of training, and so the expectations are different of their medical students versus ours. But I sort of flip that back when we have those conversations and say, I understand that that's your system, but I want you to understand our system. And these students they've had 4 site visits as part of a practice in medicine course, and maybe they volunteered at a student-run free clinic, but procedures and all those things. I mean, even in 3rd, 4th year, it's hard to get your hands on procedures. So, but I will say, so sometimes there's pushback, right? And they'll say, well, what can they do? Collect data for you? No, but I think there's also has to be a compromise, right? And so in some sites I've had to negotiate with the site supervisor. Well, they say, I remember I got a call, we couldn't have been prouder. This is my 2nd year here, the 3rd year here. It was my 2nd year sending students to Uganda. And I sent these students to Southwest Uganda, and they actually, I was traveling, I was somewhere else, Peru, I think, and they Skyped me. I said, Dr. Ash, we need to talk to you. Let's Skype. So I Skyped, and they said, we just want to let you know, Dr. Ronald, who was the hospital superintendent, said he said by the end of the rotation we should be able to deliver a baby, or no, we should be able to it was like deliver a baby and do a C-section. And we were like, I was like, no. And luckily I was actually heading to Uganda like the next week. I said, don't do it. Tell him I said no. And I knew him, and I said, just tell him I'll be there. And when I went there, he said, listen, I said, these students are telling me they can't draw blood, they can't place IVs, they can't put Foley catheters. He said, I expect my 1st year midwife students to do that stuff. And I said to him, we just don't train them for that. I said, if you tell me what you want them to do, I can make sure that they get training before they come. Right? That's the safest way to do it, right? And we've studied that before. When I was living in Botswana, we were noticing a huge number of needle sticks among the students, and that's a place where about 60 or 70% of the inpatients are HIV positive, many of whom have very high viral loads. So an exposure in that setting is a much more high-risk exposure than, you got splashed with some amniotic fluid, right, in your eye. So it's different. And we studied it, and we showed that when you show people how to do it, make them practice on Sims or whatever with the equipment from there, you can actually make it safer for everybody. So I said, just let me, if you want them to do that, I can prepare. Anyway, he left, so students don't do that anymore. But those negotiations, I said they can make sure someone teaches them. I said if someone teaches them, because we would do that here. Like the general rule for us is, if you wouldn't do it unsupervised here, don't do it. But if you're a student here and you do a preceptorship or a summer experience in ENT in the community, they may let you scrub in and may let you assist. I mean, even as a junior student, and that's okay, as long as it's about the supervision.
And the training too. It's one thing, like I know a bunch of Irish students who have said for like a year during them there basically straight in, but then their training is just more condensed. And so by the time that they're graduating, they're ready for, or if they're midwife and apprenticing and that kind of stuff, then they take it in stepwise, but your training is stepwise fashion for a short period of time.
Yes.
So it's, then you're not like, oh my gosh, you're going to do what? As opposed to, so I think they sometimes understand that our training in the U.S. is a lot more drawn out than a lot of the rest of the world.
Very true.
But I do believe that our medical system is way more like you go to med school after 4 years after your 12th grade. Because I come from India. India med school is after your 12th grade, you go 4 years to 4 years, yeah, med
It's like
school.
6 years, yeah,
6 years, and that's it. It's so different. It's so different.
It's a British model, and a lot of countries in
Yeah.
the world have that model where you go straight from secondary school into your professional college, so nursing or
Yeah, because the
sciences or
bachelor's
medicine.
is 12 plus 3, because I had a bachelor's in micro and it wasn't equivalent here. So the med school is like just 6 years, like 12 plus 3.
Isn't
Yeah.
America the only country that does undergrad?
It's U.S., Canada, Mexico. Does Mexico do undergrad?
Pretty sure no.
No, Mexico does not. Mexico's on the British system as well.
Go straight to.
Yeah.
Like we're not the
No. And many countries look at that as sort of like,
Yeah, because a lot of
why are
people
you
ask-
wasting time?
A lot of people ask me about my son. My son is a senior. He's starting school this year, college, and then what does he want to do? He wants to go to medicine. Oh, so he goes to med school. I'm like, no. He goes to 4 years of bachelor's,
Yeah.
and then he starts med school. Why would he do so? I'm like, well, that's how it works here.
It does, yeah.
The Irish students just couldn't understand. Like, I was like, well, no, then they go to med school. And I was like, then they go to med school, then they have their doctor. And it's like, internship in this, because they were going straight from their 4-year med school to doctors, basically practicing.
Wow.
And
No
like,
internship, no
well,
residency.
you get an internship and a residency, but it's much shorter.
Okay.
And what you, from my understanding, talking to them, like you're basically a practicing doctor at that point, and you're going to go into the practice that you're going to.
Yeah, they have sort of a system, like a lot of the British system, they have a cadre
Yeah.
that we don't have anymore. We used to have them. They were called GPs, general practitioners.
Yes.
Not residency trained. So you did medical school, you did your USMLE Step 1, you did your USMLE Step 2, so you did your internship, USMLE Step 3, and you could get a license to practice general medicine. But it was general, it was very, it was, and as all of the health professions here became more professionalized and required more training and more schooling, then basically that cadre went away, and they said, well, everybody, then those guys were competing with family medicine trained residents. It's like, we can't compete. It's the same market. So.
Well, that's what I think about applying for med school in the States. It's not all of them are like, first off, really expensive. I guess it's really hard to get into. Like
Yeah.
the test they have to pass versus the test for entrance test for internship and residency, which I guess they can go to or something. Or she said it was very intimidating.
Yeah, and in Ireland and in the UK system, they do their 6 years of medical school, and then they do a rotational internship, and they can be a GP, but if they want to go on to do residency or become a registrar, they become a house officer for about 3 years. It actually ends up being around the same time. It's just a bit more split up, and there's more pathways for differentiation at different times. So it's just a different model, because then they can go on to become a consultant. And that's another 3 or 4 years where maybe you're doing some research and that's more like kind of the letter U, that's more like a fellowship, right? And so, yeah, it's just, they're different systems. I guess they have their benefits.
So now over here is the DO and MD on the same thing.
Mhm.
How different is DO?
A doctor of osteopathy, it's basically taking the MD, but also adding in spinal manipulation. So they learn spinal manipulation as well, as part of like a holistic model of care of the patient. So it's just a little bit of a different model, but they come out with this, like they can compete for the same residencies. Cool.
It's always been to anybody with any kind of health literacy, whether it's in medicine or counseling, lifestyle choices, health promotion, whatever it is, there's benefit to such persons being in various communities, particularly the developing countries where they don't have access to all of the resources that we may have in developed countries. So I want to say that quite clearly, that
You guys have an iPhone charger.
as a minister from a developing country, I believe there's huge benefits to be derived from students, faculty, experienced healthcare providers from one environment to come and join us.
Oui, je pense que c'est très très important. Ils doivent venir parce que un jeune étudiant qui passe toutes ses études en Europe ou bien au Canada ou aux États-Unis, parfois il ne s'imagine pas que quelque part dans le monde, la médecine existe dans de mauvaises conditions. Donc, ils doivent arriver. Un bon médecin, c'est un médecin qui doit s'adapter à toutes les conditions, mauvaises ou bonnes qu'elles soient. Donc, c'est important qu'ils viennent parce que je suis sûr, un médecin, il n'est pas seulement un médecin d'Europe ou du Canada, c'est un médecin du monde.
With all the questions and ethical pitfalls, a moratorium on medical student electives and projects in developing countries might seem inevitable. But the growth of perspective that comes from witnessing how others live outside our own experience, and the development of a sense of social responsibility to the health of the world, may be one of the most important reasons to continue supporting medical student global health programs.
I mean, we are part of a global village now, and I think that we're not simply training physicians and others as insular individuals in their own environment. Yes, perhaps our first responsibility is to the people of the Maritimes, for example, in developing a cadre of competent physicians. But I think the way the world is going, that's not enough, that we need to do a lot more, and we need to have more of a sense of responsibility overseas.
Well, the world is a village now. What happens in Africa would soon, in one way or the other, get into Europe, into America, into Asia, etc. So knowledge that is available in Africa should be shared as well to other countries.
Because if you hear about HIV in sub-Saharan Africa, it's different if you are here and see the problem and try to help to solve it. So to me, I see that it's very, very important for other people from outside sub-Saharan Africa to come and try to help.
I think for me, you don't really understand the problems until you see it with your own eyes. You can watch it on TV, you can see pictures in the movies. It's just not the same until you get here.
I mean, at least as a medical student, not as a doctor, it's very little to do with altruism, in the present at least. I'm not saving anyone's life. I don't even know most of the drugs that are being prescribed to these patients. So I would be completely naive if I thought I was making any difference at the moment. But I think by gaining this experience, hopefully down the road, I can be better prepared to serve a community like this.
Maybe 1 in 100 people that go on for an elective will actually do something long.
You guys feel like there's some positive messaging there? Yeah, like it's not all doom and gloom, right? I mean, there's a lot of benefits, and that's why we keep doing this, right? We talked about that a little bit at the beginning. Like the reason we keep pushing you guys into this kind of stuff is just, I'm convinced that, everybody should be doing these things because, we're an increasingly globalized society, even here in the States. The more you know about the rest of the world, the better you can serve people here. And that's been studied. Anyway, we'll let this guy keep going.
Long term in a developing country. Sadly, it's not 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3. But in reality, only very few will go on to do long-term work. And it's only the people that have a permanent position and spend many years to learn the language and contribute their lives on a long-term basis that will really make any kind of sustainable impact.
Most of what medical students are able to accomplish is short-term. Academic and life requirements make it impractical to stay more than a few weeks or months at a time. Yet the goal of global health, or really any development initiative, is sustainability. And sustainability depends on long-term initiatives. So what kind of global health experiences for students can serve this goal?
Ones that are cooperative, ones that involve partnership and collaboration. And in the truer sense of the word, and not just, those token words to make something sound good. Where you've got true interaction between both sides, where there's that freedom to be able to speak and express opinions, where it's a collaborative effort and not the Western party saying we've got a great idea and the other party saying, oh great, we're going to go along with what you say because you're going to give us money. And sometimes that truly happens. You know, you ask, what can we do? And you get a response like, oh, anything's fine. And so being able to get beyond that, and having it so that it's not having it so that there's no hierarchy or, you know, donor and recipient kind of relationship. But I think partnerships that are sustainable, so what's our long-term goal and what's our long-term vision? I think the best partnerships are ones where you can actually see yourself not working there anymore.
Yeah, well, I don't think in terms of filling the gap, I don't think it's a gap that the West can fill. I think the West has an obligation to provide financial resources and knowledge transfer and the other things that will help build a sustainable healthcare system or a sustainable whatever you want to do within the country. And I think that, but ultimately it is up to the individuals.
So I think starting off with the question, what can we learn from you? And then we learn from them. And then what can we do for you? Not how can I help you, what can we do for you? What do you need? And you're going to get answers that may not involve you. Yeah.
But you know, there is also inherently a belief by many of these people that we don't know what we want. I want to say quite clearly that no consultant could tell me what I want. I know what I want. I may not know all the answers of how to do it, but I know what I want.
If there are benefits to overseas global health experiences for medical students, these ethical questions must be addressed so good intentions can lead to the desired outcomes of creating global citizens, fair partnerships, and ultimately sustainable healthcare systems. Appropriate preparation is key to this process.
It's always the people who say that they don't need pre-departure training who are the ones who actually need it.
A lot of them come with a kind of a pie-in-the-sky idea that they're going to make a big impact in the health of a developing country, which is completely unrealistic. A lot of them are not particularly culturally sensitive, and so they do inflame the local doctors, in fact, with some of the way they act, some of the things they do, some of the things they wear. For instance, we have medical students that come and smoke on the hospital campus, and to us, in India, that's a complete shock. I mean, no one would even consider that a medical professional would smoke, but a lot of European medical students do. And so that's a very cross-cultural experience. A lot of our young women medical students wear very sort of brief things on the ward that are not appropriate for what women would wear in India. Which reflects that I think these students are not well prepared for their overseas experience. They come with poor attitudes. They're not humble, and they're not willing to observe what's happening and fit in appropriately, but to keep their own culture despite working in a developing country.
You know, really, if you wanted to really properly prepare for an elective, you probably have to take a couple of years.
Learn as much as you can about the culture and the people before you go. What I see with a lot of programs is that people go, and this is not just students, mission trips and lots of different things. If people go to another country, they don't really understand the issues before they go, and they try to apply North American solutions to other areas of the world, and it doesn't work well. And what I found also is that if you don't learn before you go, if you just try to go and practice or give, then you may just reinforce your own prejudices.
Is to start. Don't go with the kind of Lonely Planet guide version of culture, or the National Geographic version of culture, because that's an incomplete picture. I would say find somebody from the country you're going to. Talk to them about what they feel like the issues are.
Can a program really prepare you for living in Africa, India, or South America? No way. No way. Not even close. But and give you some awareness of what you're going to encounter and prepare you for some of the scary things that you will encounter? Yes, I think it can.
If we are to achieve fair partnerships, there is a significant
I think that guy interviewed me for medical school, by the way. Every time I watch this, I'm like, I think because I interviewed it in Newfoundland.
deficit in our current programs. As much as students from the West are able to travel to developing countries in order to achieve their learning objectives, the reverse is rare.
For example, for myself, I had an opportunity to go to study in Europe. I spent time there, so at least I have a picture, a small picture of what is going there. And my stay there helped me a lot.
Partnerships with the universities have grown, and this year we're hoping to see some Thai medical students come here to Halifax to do an elective, so that reciprocity that we've always been wanting to see is starting to actually happen. So that's a very exciting benefit, and that's also reflected in the partnership. And the partnership isn't only a student partnership, it's also a faculty and research partnership, so that the summer program in Thailand is all of the players within the university. And I think that is a huge benefit.
Actually, one of the problems we have had is that we don't get enough South-South exchanges. We need more of this. We get a lot of North-South, by North I mean the Western countries exchanges. We get people from Canada, from the US, from some European countries, even from Australia. But we have had a few from South Africa. We haven't had enough students from the other African countries. That's a limitation.
Regardless of where a student comes from, and as important as it is to prepare before leaving, having an organized program with structure through the host institution can mitigate some of the more negative impacts on the host community and ensure that the balance of service and learning is fair to patients and learners alike. Universities, as the institutions that support students, can play a significant role in ensuring that partnerships achieve their goals.
The growing phenomenon of medical students going into different environments and enhancing their education to experiences outside of a classroom and textbook has never been considered as a significant part of our training. So that many people who go and participate do not get the extra credit for it or so on. Because at the end of the day, you will graduate just like your colleagues who never went.
The other piece is the complexity of global health. So we assume that there is a problem and there's an easy answer, but there's not. I mean, we talk about the determinants of health, and they make life very complicated. So sometimes we look at one answer and we try and put a Band-Aid on it, but what it does is it creates a much bigger problem somewhere else. So for example, a student may have identified a partner that they want to work with, but they've not looked at what that relationship is with the university, or that partner with the corporate world, with mining companies or pharmaceutical companies. So those broader ethical questions have not been explored.
That's what kind of encircles this whole problem, is how to go about defining your role and engaging in a productive way, in a meaningful way, without compromising people's dignity and without becoming paralyzed. It's very easy to become paralyzed when you think of all these ethical questions. Is it ethical to spend all of this money? There's environmental problems with flying 10,000 miles around the planet. There's language issues, the cultural issues. Is it all worth it? Is it going to make any difference? Is it going to be a drop in the bucket?
I had a tough time with the definition of global health. I mean, I just think there's health, and there's health in Halifax, and there's health in Ishikara, and some places have more resources and more human resources than others. I think maybe global health is looking beyond of living?
I feel like with a lot of like the ethical conversations, every time I come out of it, I kind of feel like, oh my God, like, why am I here? Like, it's not even worth it. I should have just donated all that money, and like, I'm not doing any good, and like, why am I here? And then I think I just kind of have to step back and remind myself that, you know, I am one of the people who care, and I am someone who wants to do good, and I'm doing everything with the best of intentions. And like, even if I'm wasting a little bit of money, like some good is coming out of it, and hopefully in the future, even more good is going to come out of it. And I don't want the ethical conversations to discourage people from acting.
But I mean, even saying it out loud, kind of, it doesn't feel very good. I don't think pure cynicism is helpful when you're doing this kind of work, nor is pure optimism. Blind faith.
So I think one of the big things for universities is to keep growing, keep supporting the global health movement that is growing, and to be asking the very questions that you're asking. What are we doing, and why are we doing it? And it's okay to have some conflict in those discussions, because if we don't, we're never going to have a truly strong program in global health for whoever we're working with. It may often seem that these ethical questions are immobilizing. If there is something to be gained from medical student electives and projects, then that paralysis is a true loss. But maybe there's a reason these ethical questions are so difficult to answer. And maybe that's because they challenge our understanding of the world and our place in it. Answering may be less important than actually asking the hard questions. By challenging the essence of global health and how we fit into it, our understanding will evolve, whether we are learners, teachers, partners, heroes, or voyeurs.
And maybe there's a place for that voyeurism. Maybe that voyeurism is the first trip you take, and then you realize a year later that you're being voyeur, and then you strive over subsequent time frames and trips to make up for that or to remedy that. I think that's common. I think we talk about the ideals of global health. I think global health, each person has their own path, and early on your path, you're probably going to do something, a program or a trip or a presentation or a research project that's totally inappropriate. And that's okay. I mean, it's not okay. We wish it didn't happen, but it's okay because hopefully if you stick with the field, you as a person will evolve as the field is evolving to become much more self-aware, much more ethically oriented, and much more self-reflective to say, why am I really doing this? And then subsequent endeavors will remedy those motivations. We can't help our ignorance and our naivete sometimes. That's a natural stage in the progression of education. So I think people that are voyeurs now see what they're doing.
Thoughts?
Quick question.
Yeah.
Since we just go there as students, medical students, and are basically supposed to be observing and not working as such, how are they in a set to them? How do they help them?
How does who help?
Students help them.
How do students help?
Yeah, we gain a lot of
Yeah.
experience as a student. Yes, I understand as global health and
Mhm.
culture and all that kind of different things. But what do they get out of us
Well, what do you think? What do you guys think?
if you're not supposed to help them?
Mhm.
Just our views and our perspectives of what we have to tell them, kind of stuff. That what we do or what can be done.
What do you think partners might get out of it?
Like free work, there's always that.
Mhm.
Applying it to help them do those jobs that they can't find stuff to do.
I'm saying with regards to what you're not supposed to be doing. You're not doing any jobs. That's
But there's always jobs that can be done. It's
something like filing or something like.
There might not be
stuff
exciting,
like
but
that.
there's always, excuse my language, the shit jobs nobody wants to do. And that's what partners get at. If they have somebody they don't have to pay to do stuff that they don't want to have done, while at the same time learning from any experience you have with anybody from different cultures, from different places, brings a new
You mean the cleanup jobs?
invention to your thought, and so they get an insight into Western medicine and for how we do stuff, how we do training. That's why visiting different schools and learning different education models and different stuff might be like, well, I'm never going to do it that way, but you at least have a new perspective or a new twist. And then trust me, they enjoy having somebody, if they know they're coming to do stuff that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah, there's stuff like, I mean, one of the students that I sent to Kenya once, and they're like, first year, yeah, well, basically it was like, if you feel useless, stop being useless. Like, you probably are useless, and you should stop being useless, because there's always something to do that's within your realm, and that's within your control, and that's within your capabilities. So, for example, when we were in Botswana, we studied this. We never got to publish it because Ben didn't want us to publish it, but we asked nurses, we asked doctors, we asked lab folks, we asked everybody, like, what do you think of the students? What's useful about them? What's useless about them? What's good? What's bad? And in general, the positive things were like, listen, these students are, they're coming from another country, they're bringing a different perspective, they're eager and willing to help. They help us with things like getting the charts organized for rounds, making sure that someone's gone to X-ray and picked up the X-rays so we can look at them on rounds, following up on the blood work, keeping a list of the tasks, even just organizational things that are not procedural. I mean, you could think about it in a lab setting too, right? Like, you think about a clinical lab setting where, maybe you're not going to be the one making decisions, but gosh, saying, oh,
missing
I wonder,
labs, the most
or
important.
yeah, missing labs, or like, oh, just watching the QA even, like QA, QI, like that's actually what we put a lot of the med students to work on. Like the first years who are not clinical, they do QI projects because you don't need, you need someone, these are questions that the hospitals have and the health systems have that nobody has time to answer. So the way we like for us, the way we add value, or we have our students add value, is we go and we say, hey, what work can they do for you and how can we help organize it into a project? Then the students are happy because then they get to go and do their project and they get to write an abstract about it and they present it, and their partner's happy because they've gotten a project, like they got some information maybe that's going to help them improve their services, and then kind of everybody, then my bosses are happy because they can say, oh, the students aren't out there voyeurizing, they're out there doing something. Anyway.
Thank you.
A lot of ethical challenges. You'll probably be challenged with new dilemmas. It's really important that you be well prepared, and we try to do this by offering this course, but then just even throughout your own programs, when they're sending you places, most people here are generally sensitized to what's important for you to know before you go. Safety, supervision, culture and beliefs, doing projects. So I will just end with this. It's important to know your limits, but to bring enthusiasm and bring that willingness to help, because that's not a bad thing. And I hope that that's what you got at the end of this, was that these people weren't saying, like, students are useless, they should just stay at home. It's a complicated world. It's not always straightforward. There are a lot of potential harms, but there's a lot of potential benefits as well. So I'm going to end there and end the class.
Thank you.
Stay safe. I don't think it started. I don't think it started this evening.
Yeah, I'll rush off before it gets
So
ugly.
yeah, get out of here before it starts getting crazy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name again. I'm sorry.
Matt Dasho.
Dr. Matt.
Dr. Dasho. Yeah, or
Dasho.
Dr. Matt, or just Matt. It doesn't matter.
Thank you, Dr. Dash.
Yeah.